When a cowboy pulled a girl from the raging river, he thought he was saving one life. By morning, 4 tribes rode down from the hills bearing gifts. But one tribe was missing, and their silence would prove louder than war drums before the sun set again. The river had risen angry, fast and full of secrets. Malachi Kane felt it before he saw it. Something in the air, like iron and thunder wrapped in silence. He rode the northern bend of the Little Snake River out of instinct, not reason. That's how it worked in the frontier. Trust your gut, or die with your rifle still loaded. Then came the splash. Faint, sharp, wrong. He dismounted in one smooth motion and sprinted toward the sound. There, caught in the current, was a girl, no more than 10 years old, tangled in willow roots. She didn't thrash. She didn't scream. Just clung with quiet desperation as the river tried to pull her apart. He dove without hesitation. The current pulled like the grip of a dying man, cold and mean. But Malachi had been raised in worse. He fought the river, dragged her free, and carried her ashore, lungs burning. She weighed next to nothing. Her skin was cold, lips blue, but she was alive. Apache. He could tell from the beadwork woven into the wet leather tied around her waist. But something was off. The pattern was ceremonial, sacred. She clutched a leather pouch to her chest, too tightly for someone unconscious. Malachi brought her home, laid her near the fire, wrapped her in wool, and watched her breathe like someone who'd outrun death. When she finally opened her eyes, they weren't the eyes of a child. They were old, knowing. And in perfect English, she whispered one word: chosen. Malachi didn't know what she meant. Not then. But 4 fires would burn on his land by dawn, and the wind was already turning. Malachi barely slept that night. The girl lay near the hearth, still as stone, but the air around her felt strange, heavy, like the prairie itself was holding its breath. She hadn't spoken again, hadn't moved, just held tight to that leather pouch like it was the only thing keeping her anchored to this world. Malachi made coffee before dawn, but his hands trembled. He kept glancing toward the window, half expecting something to be standing there, watching, judging, and then he heard it. Drums. Low, rhythmic, faint at first, then closer. By the time he stepped outside, the horizon was already moving. 4 groups approached from 4 different directions. Horsemen in ceremonial paint, elders cloaked in fur and ash, women bearing baskets, children riding behind warriors. No banners, no war cries. And yet, it felt like a siege. Malachi counted them as they approached: Cedar from the west, Tall from the north, Apache from the south, and Cheyenne from the east. He'd never seen all 4 tribes gathered without bloodshed between them. No 5th. They stopped in a wide circle around his homestead, a clearing of silence between them. No one spoke. Then one elder dismounted and walked forward. "She is here," the old man said. Malachi didn't ask how he knew. The man looked him over, then added, "You took her from the river. That means you were chosen too." Chosen again, that word. Malachi opened the door. The girl was still there, awake now, watching. 4 tribes had come to see her, but not one of them claimed her. Malachi stepped aside, letting the elders enter his home. The girl didn't flinch, didn't move. She just stared at them as though she'd known this moment was coming. First came the cedar elder, a woman with white braids and storm-gray eyes. She placed a feathered stone beside the girl's head and whispered a prayer to the mountain spirits. Then the tall and stern, unrolled a bundle of dyed deer hide and set it at her feet. It bore the shape of a circle divided in 4, north, south, east, west, with a single empty corner. The Cheyenne man brought a carved flute, placed it near the fire, unplayed. The Apache last. A younger man. His gift was different, practical, not ceremonial, a knife wrapped in woven sinew. Malachi caught the look in his eyes. War wasn't far from his mind. And still, the girl said nothing. "She belongs to all," said the tall elder. "No," said the Apache. "She belongs to the path she walked. She chose him first." His eyes shifted to Malachi. The Cheyenne elder raised his hand. "Enough. She is Dawnwalker. We do not claim her. We follow." That name, Dawnwalker, hung in the air like smoke. Outside, the gathered tribes waited in silence. warriors on horseback watching Malachi's cabin like it held a storm. Inside, the girl finally moved. She reached for her pouch and slowly opened it. Inside was a single object, a shard of obsidian, black as night, warm to the touch. The cedar elder stepped back, whispering, "It begins." No one explained what it was, but Malachi knew this much. Whatever the girl had brought with her, it wasn't over. It was just waking up. The room smelled of firewood, old cedar, and wet leather. The girl sat upright now, silent still, her fingers wrapped around the obsidian shard like it pulsed with life. The elders had formed a loose circle around her, murmuring in languages older than the land. Malachi leaned against the cabin wall, arms crossed. He didn't understand the words, but he felt the weight of them. The tall elder turned to him and spoke in slow, careful English. "She is not just a girl. She is the vessel of an old promise. When the world begins to turn dark, 4 winds will rise from the corners of the land, and a child will walk between them, carrying light or fire. That child is called Dawnwalker." The cedar woman nodded. Each generation tells the story, thinking it's just a story. But the signs came this season. The owls cried at noon, the sun bled at morning, and now she arrives through the river. Malachi looked to the girl. "And she chose me." "Why?" the Cheyenne elder answered. "Because one not of the circle must stand at the center. It was always written that an outsider would carry the 5th wind." Malachi frowned. "5th? There's only 4 here." Silence. The Apache elder's face darkened. The 5th wind was the One-Eyed People, the Broken Hills tribe, destroyed 2 winters ago, wiped out by rifles and lies. Some say they betrayed the others. Some say they were betrayed. The cedar woman added, "Their absence breaks the balance, and the child must choose, bridge the circle or burn it." Malachi glanced at the girl. Her black eyes met his. No child should hold that kind of choice. But she did, and the land was already listening. The fire burned low, casting long shadows across the cabin floor. Malachi knelt beside the hearth, pretending to sip coffee, though his cup was empty. He watched the girl. Everyone did. She hadn't spoken since yesterday's single word, chosen. But now she turned to the flames. Her lips moved, quiet at first, then stronger, speaking a language none of the elders fully recognized. It wasn't Apache, nor tall. It was older, braided and fluid, like wind singing through canyon stone. The smoke changed. It didn't rise. It coiled, took shape. First, a bear, then an eagle, then a jagged cliff crumbling into the sea, then a man in silhouette holding a blade of stone. The cedar elder gasped and dropped her feathered charm. The Cheyenne covered his eyes. Only the Apache elder remained still, though his hand drifted to the knife at his belt. "She speaks the language of the 5th wind," he whispered, "of the Broken Hills." The air turned heavy. Malachi felt it in his chest like a hand pressing down. Then the girl stopped. Silence returned. She turned to Malachi, her voice barely audible but clear. "You know the 5th. He's still alive." Malachi blinked. "What do you mean?" She raised her obsidian shard toward the window, pointing east. The Apache elder stood. "If that's true, it means the prophecy isn't broken. It's unfinished. And if the 5th still lives," the Cheyenne added, "he may not come in peace." The girl looked back at the fire, her expression unreadable. Then the wind outside changed direction, and every horse among the tribes whinnied in unison, like something was coming. A wind swept through the valley, sharp and sudden. The smoke in Malachi's chimney reversed for a moment, sucked downward, like the earth itself had taken a breath. The girl stood. She walked to the cabin door, opened it, and stared toward the distant ridgelines east of the homestead. Her obsidian shard gleamed faintly in the gray light. The elders followed, murmuring in unease. Malachi stepped out behind them. There, far beyond the fields, a single black rider appeared on the horizon. No banner, no escort, just dust and the silhouette of a man too distant to name, yet close enough to set nerves on edge. The Apache elder squinted. "No tribal markings. Not cavalry either," muttered the Cheyenne. "But he comes with fire." Behind them, a scout rode up fast from the west, breathless and pale. "Bad news," he called before dismounting. The army's on the move. Captain Shaw's unit out of Fort Delaney. 30 men, all armed. The tall elder's voice was grim. That fort's 3 days from here. They'll be here by sundown. They're tracking the girl. The cedar woman touched her necklace. They must have seen the gathering. They'll think it's a war council. They won't wait to ask, said Malachi. The black rider on the ridge still hadn't moved. The girl, silent as ever, raised her shard to the sky. The clouds above began to spin. Malachi felt it in his bones. The balance was tipping. And no one, not soldier, not elder, not even the girl, knew which way it would fall. The air inside Malachi's cabin had turned still and warm, thick like a summer storm before the first crack of thunder. The girl sat beside the hearth, her obsidian shard resting on her lap. Outside, the elders paced, their voices rising with every turn. "The army comes to take her," the Apache elder growled. "We cannot let that happen." The tall shook his head. "If we shed blood, the rivers will run red for years." "And if we let them take her?" the Cheyenne asked, arms crossed. "What then? They'll study her, use her." "She's not ours to defend," the cedar woman said. "She is spirit-touched. If she is truly Dawnwalker, let her choose." All heads turned as the girl stood and walked to the cabin's threshold. Malachi was there already, leaning against the post. He hadn't said a word during the argument. Not once. The girl touched his arm. Just a brief, soft touch. Then she stepped back and spoke clearly, softly. "He stays with me." The elders froze. Even the wind outside seemed to hush. "She has chosen," whispered the cedar woman. Malachi straightened. "Then I ride with her." The Apache elder narrowed his eyes. "You would die for a child and not of your blood." "I would," Malachi said, "but not for prophecy. For what's right." Silence again. Then the girl looked eastward, toward the black rider still watching from the ridge. "The fifth is waiting," she said. Malachi nodded. "Then we ride to meet him. Before the army does." The rider on the ridge didn't move all day. He sat like a crow on a grave post, silhouetted by the sinking sun, watching the cabin with the patience of a man who'd stared into fire before and knew exactly when it would burn. The tribes below kept to their places, uneasy. Horses pawed the dirt. Children were kept close. The girl stayed silent. Malachi sharpened a blade out of habit more than need, sitting on the porch with one eye on the rider. He felt the weight of prophecy like a yoke across his shoulders, but it wasn't what troubled him. It was something else. Something in his gut that twisted tighter with each hour of silence. Then, near dusk, a movement. Subtle. A figure slipped between the tents. White coat, dark hair, moving too easily for a man unfamiliar with tribal customs. He didn't belong. And Malachi knew it. He rose slowly, hand-brushing his revolver, and stepped into the path the stranger had taken. The figure ducked behind one of the Apache supply carts. Malachi followed. No questions, no warning. He caught the man halfway through cutting a water bladder with a bone-handled knife. "Malachi Kane," the man said calmly, without looking up. "Didn't think I'd see you again." Malachi drew. "That makes 2 of us." The man stood slowly. He wore no military insignia, no tribal beads, just the dust of a man who rode far and didn't care who knew it. His left hand was burned, fingers twisted like old roots. Malachi recognized him now. "Daniel Morgan," Malachi muttered. "Scout for the Federal Land Office. Or at least you were." Morgan smirked. "Still am, depending who you ask. I scout ahead. Point the army where the gold is, or the ghosts. You poisoned the water. I sampled it," Morgan corrected. "These people gather. Washington gets nervous. The girl draws fire like kindling in a dry forest. You know what she is? I know what they think she is. That's enough to get bullets flying." Malachi stepped closer. "You're not just watching, you're lighting fuses." Morgan's smile dropped. "There's a 5th tribe, Kane. One you won't find in songs or stories. They remember what was done to them. And they're coming. Not for her. For everyone." "What does that mean?" But Morgan didn't answer. He dropped a small leather pouch to the ground, backed away, and vanished into the shadows of the Cheyenne line before Malachi could react. Inside the pouch, coyote bones painted with red ink, broken flint shards, and a folded piece of skin. Human. Carved on it, a symbol Malachi didn't recognize. But the girl did. She looked at it once, and her hands began to shake. Night fell fast and hard. Fires burned low, warriors whispered in guarded tongues, and the ridge where the Black Rider had sat all day was now empty, gone, without a trace or a sound. But the unease he left behind hung like smoke. Inside Malachi's cabin, the girl hadn't spoken since seeing the symbol on the human skin. She now sat with her arms crossed tight over her chest, eyes hollow and unreadable. Malachi sat across from her, the pouch and its strange contents between them on the table. The obsidian shard she carried was warm again. He could feel its heat from where he sat. The tribal elders arrived one by one. The cedar woman examined the contents carefully, then closed her eyes in dread. The Cheyenne elder turned pale. The Apache simply stood in silence, jaw clenched. "It's not a curse," the tall said at last. "It's a summons." "A what?" Malachi asked. "Someone is calling something back," said the cedar. "Not the fifth tribe, but what was buried with them." The Apache elder finally spoke. "The Broken Hills tribe wasn't wiped out by settlers. Not entirely. A portion went underground. Not in caves. Underground in belief. In darkness. They walked away from the four winds and became something else." "Outcasts?" Malachi asked. "Worse," said the Cheyenne. "Keepers of the old fire." Malachi felt the weight of that term settle like ash. He'd heard whispers of it in trading posts and saloons, legends of a cult that mixed blood rites with earth spirits, one that had once tried to call back the dead for revenge. Thought it was just ghost talk. But the girl stood suddenly, not afraid, angry. "They sent him," she said, voice sharp. "The man with the burned hand." "You mean Morgan?" Malachi asked. She nodded. "He wore the mark on his soul." "How do you know?" She pointed at the pouch. "Because that symbol isn't just a warning, it's a map." The elders fell into a storm of whispers. Finally, the Apache elder turned to Malachi. "We know where the fifth lives now, and what he's become." Malachi exhaled slowly. "Then we go there." "No," said the cedar. "If you ride there, you bring the old fire to all of us." "We're already burning," Malachi said. "I'd rather see it coming." The girl stepped forward, obsidian in hand. "I will go," she said, "and he will answer to me." Outside, dogs began to howl in the dark. And in the east, something howled back. The elders argued until dawn, but the girl would not yield. By sunrise, Malachi had saddled his mare and packed provisions. The girl rode behind him, her arms wrapped around his coat, obsidian tucked in her pouch like it was alive. They didn't ride alone. Two warriors joined them, one Cheyenne, one tall, silent, grim, and fast. They took no trail, only wind signs and ravens overhead. The land they crossed changed subtly with each mile. Grass turned brittle, streams ran shallow, and birds fell silent before they passed. They rode east, toward the broken lands once held by the fifth wind. Their destination, a hidden ridge in the Black Buttes, where an old medicine man named Three Trees was said to keep watch over the dead tribes. A man who hadn't spoken to any council in nearly a decade. But he was the last to have seen the Broken Hills alive. The girl insisted he would be waiting. By noon, Malachi felt the first sickness take hold. Not illness of the body, but a pulling in the blood, like the land itself was drawing something out of him. The girl began humming softly, a sound that didn't match her age. A song of the old tongues. That's when the dreams started. Not when he slept, when he blinked. Each time his eyes closed, even for a second, he saw fire. Bones arranged in circles, faces with no eyes, and one man, always standing in the middle. Morgan, but changed, burned, smiling. By evening they reached the ridge. There were no signs of life, just stacked stones in a wide spiral pattern, half sunk in the earth. The warriors dismounted. The girl walked ahead, obsidian shard held high. The spiral shimmered. Then the wind rose, hot, sharp, dry, and a figure stepped from behind a jagged rock, draped in robes made of crow feathers and deer sinew. Three Trees. He was blind, his eyes milk-white and fogged. But he faced the girl like he saw her clearly. "You shouldn't have come," he said. The girl stepped forward. "But I must." Three Trees tilted his head, listening. Then, to Malachi, he said, "She's not what you think she is." "I know," Malachi answered. "No, you don't." Then Three Trees turned his face to the sky and began to chant. not in warning, but in grief, and the earth beneath them stirred. The chant of 3 trees didn't echo. It sank, into soil, into marrow, into memory. Malachi felt his knees wobble, the sound carving through his spine like wind through canyon stone. The girl didn't flinch, but her obsidian shard pulsed a deep red now, faint but steady. Then the world folded. Not in a flash, not in fire, it simply changed. One blink, and Malachi wasn't standing on a ridge anymore. He stood alone in a dusty plain, sky black and rolling, no sun, no stars. Just the low moan of a wind that felt like it carried voices, familiar ones. Ahead, a figure approached through the dust. At first, Malachi thought it was Morgan again, but this man was younger, cleaner, wore a cavalry coat too big for his shoulders, and carried a Bible in one hand, a pistol in the other. Malachi's heart stuttered. It was his brother, Micah Kane, dead 20 years, killed in a Comanche raid that Malachi had survived. Guilt carved every line into his face like a blade. "You left me," Micah said, voice low. "You told me to run. You ran too far." Malachi stepped back. The wind screamed. All around them, bones rose from the ground. Buffalo, deer, human, shaking loose like something was crawling underneath. Micah dropped the Bible, drew his pistol. "You want to save her?" he asked. "Then show me you've changed." He fired. Malachi dropped. The pain wasn't physical. It was memory. The faces of the villagers he didn't save. The tribesmen he helped drive west. The years spent running from it all. He stood slowly, hands shaking. "I can't change what I did." Micah lowered the pistol. "Then stop hiding from it." The bones scattered. The dream cracked. And Malachi woke, gasping on the ridge, eyes full of tears and blood in his mouth. The girl stood beside him, hand on his chest. "You saw," she whispered. He nodded. 3 trees crouched nearby, his milky eyes turned eastward. "The 5th has awakened," the old man rasped. "And he remembers you, Malachi Kane?" From across the desert, drums began to beat. Slow, distant, but coming. By morning, Malachi could feel something had shifted. The air felt cleaner, sharper, like breathing in after a fever breaks. But it wasn't peace. It was the silence before a hammer falls. 3 trees crouched at the edge of the ridge, crushing dried herbs with a flat obsidian stone. Smoke rose from his bowl, bitter and thick. He mixed in dust from the spiral's center and touched the concoction to the girl's forehead, whispering words in a language older than the 4 winds. "She is bound to both light and fire," he said. The dream broke her fever, but not the link. Malachi leaned in. "Link to what?" The old man gave him no answer. Instead, he handed Malachi a leather cord with a small carved animal tooth tied at the center. It looked like a wolf fang, until Malachi turned it and saw the tiny marking burned into the base, the same symbol Morgan had left behind. 3 trees spoke again, voice dry as old parchment. "You must carry it. It was meant for her. But it will try to speak to her. Feed from her. You will keep it quiet." Malachi tied the cord around his wrist without hesitation. The girl sat nearby, quiet but alert. Her color had returned, and her eyes had steadied. But she would not touch her obsidian anymore. She kept it wrapped in a cloth of deer hide and tied it to Malachi's saddlebag. "She fears it now," 3 trees said, "because it answers back." They set out within the hour. The 2 warriors led the way down a hidden trail through the hills, an old mining path long since swallowed by grass and ash. 3 trees did not come with them. "The fire comes west," he told them, "and it will follow you faster than you expect." As they rode, the wind shifted, warmer now, carrying ash. Malachi looked to the north, to the dry basin below. Smoke, not just from brush fires. Structured, rising in columns. He spurred his horse forward and crested a low ridge. What he saw chilled him. The valley below was scorched. Grass blackened, water holes boiled dry, the skeletons of buffalo left untouched. No arrows, no signs of battle, just burning. And in the middle of the charred plain stood 5 figures on horseback, motionless. One of them turned. Even from a distance, Malachi knew who it was. Morgan. His face was different now. The burn scar across his cheek was deeper, angrier, and his eyes, one was gone, replaced with something dark and gleaming. He lifted one hand and made a gesture across his chest. 4 fingers outward, the thumb tucked in. 4 wins, missing one. A mockery. Then he pointed straight at Malachi, and the girl behind him whispered, "He's not coming to meet us." Malachi turned. "He's coming to collect." They rode hard into the wind, hooves cutting through scorched earth, the girl holding tight behind Malachi, her breath steady, unnaturally calm. The 2 warriors flanked them, silent and watchful. The trail wound west into a canyon that hadn't seen rain in years. Walls cracked and leaning, like even the land was listening. By dusk, they reached a crossroads, a crumbling missionary outpost long abandoned, where walls stood just tall enough to cast uncertain shadows. They stopped to water the horses. The girl dismounted first. "Malachi," she said, pointing toward a broken arch in the old chapel wall. "We meet them here." He followed her gaze and saw what she already sensed. A rider was coming. Not Morgan. Not a soldier. A woman, hair braided with crow feathers, eyes sharp as river stone. She rode without a saddle, her horse sleek and scarred. Her name was Ashki, and she wore no tribal marks, but all 3 elders had spoken of her once. A ghost rider, a war widow who served no chief, no council. And now she came bearing word. "Malachi Kane," she said, dismounting, "you're walking into a storm that's already begun." "I know." "Then you should know the 5th wind has found soldiers. Real ones. Shaw's company is under his flag now." "Morgan's." Malachi blinked. "What do you mean? Under him?" Ashki stepped closer. "The 5th tribe isn't just riding again. They've rewritten their name, called themselves the Ash Tongue, and they're not hunting the girl." "What then?" "They want the land to break, treaties to fail, tribes to war again. They want the Dawnwalker's light smothered so all 4 winds scatter for good." Behind them, the girl spoke softly. "They want me to choose fire." Ashki turned to her. "And will you?" The girl looked down. "I don't know yet." Malachi stepped forward. "Then we buy time." "How?" He looked to the distant ridges, already turning dark. "We meet Shaw's soldiers first, before Morgan reaches them. If they've been twisted, we untwist them. If not—" He didn't finish the thought. Ashki smiled grimly. "You're either brave or finished, Kane." "Both." Then she tossed him a signal whistle carved from hawkbone. "If you change your mind about dying alone, blow this. I know others who'll ride." Malachi tucked it into his coat. They rode out together at nightfall, 5 in total, toward the sound of war drums carried by the wind. But the girl was the only one who didn't look back. By morning, the hills had swallowed the trail behind them. Ahead lay dust and silence, the kind that made horses nervous and sweat bead beneath a man's collar. No birds, no flies. Just heat, like the sun had pressed its full weight on the land and dared it to scream. They crested a bluff and saw them, the soldiers of Fort Delaney. 30 men in uniform, tents arranged in tight order, rifles stacked by squads. But something was off. Too quiet, too still. Malachi signaled halt. He slid from the saddle and crept forward with Ashki, eyes scanning for movement. The flags were still up, Union blue and frontier gold. But there was no chatter, no cooking fire, no laughter, just a hollow kind of order. A sentry spotted them, raised a hand. Malachi raised both of his. "Peace," he called. "Malachi Kane, I come with warning." Voices stirred in the tents. Then a tall man stepped out from a command tent, shoulders squared, mustache trimmed, eyes sharp and cold. "Captain Roland Shaw, Malachi Kane," he said, like reading a name from a bounty list. "Never thought I'd hear it again. You're either lost or stupid." "Probably both," Malachi said. "But I came to talk." Shaw motioned. 2 soldiers flanked him, no weapons raised, yet. "What's in that talk, Kane?" "A man named Morgan. You know him." Shaw's eyes darkened. "He's twisting your men, turning them to something they don't understand." "Morgan's dead," Shaw snapped. "Or should be." "No," Malachi said. "He rides east of here. Burned half a valley with his ash tongues. And if he reaches your men, They'll become part of it." The captain said nothing, but his hand hovered too close to his pistol. The girl stepped forward from behind Malachi. "I know what they want," she said, "and I know how to stop it." Shaw stared at her, confused. "She's a child," he said. "You expect me to listen to a girl?" "She's the one Morgan wants," Malachi said. "That should be reason enough." Shaw laughed, dry and empty. "You think you can walk into my camp, talk of ghosts and lost tribes, and expect action?" Ashki stepped in. "Not action. Choice. You can turn east, see what follows. Or you can stand now, while you still wear your own face." Shaw looked around his camp, his men watching from the shadows, unsure. Then he drew his pistol and pointed it at Malachi. "My orders were to detain anyone consorting with renegades," he said coldly. "And that includes you." Malachi's hand twitched toward his holster. The wind picked up, but before he could move, one of Shaw's lieutenants stepped between them. "Sir," the man said, voice tight, "you should see this." Shaw turned. "Riders, coming fast, not cavalry, not tribal. Ash-tongue." Malachi's face hardened. "They got here first. They came like smoke on horseback. 12 riders in a loose formation, their cloaks mottled with soot, their faces painted bone white with streaks of blood red across their mouths. Their horses bore no brand, no reins, only black war paint and cracked hooves. They didn't slow, didn't speak. They simply rode toward the soldiers' camp like they had every right to enter." Captain Shaw lowered his pistol, staring. "Who the hell are they?" he muttered. Malachi stepped back. "Ash-tongue. What's left of the fifth wind." One of the riders dismounted, a tall figure wrapped in layers of burnt cloth and bone trinkets. He removed his hood, revealing half a face melted by flame, one eye gone. The other glowed like iron left too long in the forge. Morgan. He walked forward, slowly, as though time had no claim on him. Behind him, the other riders fanned out in silence. Shaw's men raised rifles. A few stepped back. Morgan stopped 10 paces away. "I bring a gift," he said. His voice was cracked, brittle but carried. "No one asked," Shaw growled. Morgan smiled without joy, but someone summoned. The girl. "She carries the shard." The call was hers, even if she didn't know it. Malachi moved in front of her. "She's under my protection." "Then your protection is already broken," Morgan said. "The fire rides, Cain. It cannot be held, only embraced." The girl stepped from behind Malachi, and the entire camp froze. Even Morgan tilted his head. She walked between the lines, between soldiers and Ash-tongue, her hands empty, her eyes glowing faintly with the same light as the obsidian. She stopped at the center of the space, where dust twisted in spirals. "I see what you've become," she said to Morgan. "And I see what you will," he replied. She opened her hands. Smoke curled from her palms, soft and pale. No heat, just shimmer. Then she knelt and touched the ground. A sound rippled outward. Not thunder, not wind. Something deeper, like the earth remembering a heartbeat. Every man in the camp staggered. One Ash-tongue rider screamed and fell from his horse, clawing at his chest. The others shuddered, but held formation. Morgan flinched, eyes narrowing. "You've awakened it," he hissed. The girl stood again. "No," she said. "I am it." Then she raised her voice and sang. It wasn't a melody. It was a call. From the far hills, other voices answered. Drums, hoofbeats, riders, from all 4 tribes. And they were not bringing gifts this time. The 4 tribes came like the rising tide, fast, loud, and unstoppable. From the north, the tall and eagle-feather war dress. From the east, the Cheyenne in wolf-hide cloaks. From the west, the cedar painted with red clay. And from the south, the Apache, silent and swift. Each rode with spears raised, faces grim, drums pounding like war had returned to the bones of the earth. Shaw's soldiers scrambled, shouting orders, unsure whether to fire or flee. Their rifles shook in unsteady hands. The Ash-tongue riders didn't move. They stood still amid the chaos, as if daring the storm to swallow them. Malachi pulled the girl back behind him, his revolver already drawn. Ashki took position near Shaw. whispering sharp warnings to his lieutenants. But the girl didn't run. She walked straight into the path of the oncoming tribes. The drums stopped all at once. The riders halted in unison, a wall of hooves and eyes and memory. She stood between them and Morgan. And then she knelt, not in surrender, in command. She placed her hands on the earth again, palms flat. The obsidian shard pulsed beneath her shirt, glowing so hot it lit her face from beneath. Wind screamed down from the hills. Not a breeze, an unnatural burst, circling the camp like a whip. Ash rose in spirals, wrapping the ash-tongue riders in dust. Then the girl whispered something, soft, barely louder than breath. The ground cracked. From beneath Morgan's feet, smoke erupted like a geyser, throwing him backward. Two of his riders disintegrated mid-scream, their war paint stripped clean by the wind. Morgan landed hard, coughing blood and earth, struggling to rise. The soldiers watched, frozen. The tribal warriors waited. Only the girl moved now. She stepped toward him, obsidian in hand. "You were meant to warn," she said, "not burn." Morgan snared through blood. They never listened. And now they will. She raised the shard, and a column of light, no fire, no heat, burst from the earth behind her, shooting into the sky like a spear of dawn. Every rider, every soldier, every blade and bow was bathed in that light. And then, silence. Morgan lay still. The ash-tongue riders, what was left of them, dropped their weapons. And from the top of the canyon walls the sun broke through the clouds for the first time in 5 days. Malachi holstered his revolver. Ashki exhaled. Captain Shaw fell to his knees, whispering prayers. And the girl? She looked up at the sky and whispered, "It's not over." The light faded, but the silence lingered. Not peace, just the stunned stillness that follows something too big to understand. Soldiers blinked at their rifles like they'd never held them before. The tribes remained mounted, unmoving, watching the girl like one watches thunderclouds that haven't struck yet. Morgan was gone. His body lay where he fell, half covered in ash, his face still twisted in fury. The ground around him had blackened, not burned, as if scorched by memory, not flame. Of the ash-tongue, only a handful remained, barely breathing, eyes vacant, the madness drained from their bones. Malachi stepped beside the girl. "You all right?" he asked. She didn't look at him. Her voice came flat, distant. "I saw too much. And not enough." Behind them, Ashki approached, eyes narrowed. "You ended him," she said to the girl. "No," the girl replied. "I finished what he began. He woke the fire, I buried it." The elders began to descend from the ridges. Each tribe sent a pair, Cedar, Tall, Cheyenne, Apache. They walked slow, cautious, like walking through the ruins of a prophecy. The Cedar elder, hair long as willow branches, spoke first. "She has done what we could not." "She has bound the winds," the Tall elder added. "But there is still imbalance." "The fifth remains broken," said the Cheyenne. "And broken things bleed." The girl stood now, eyes dry but dim. "Then we must name a new fifth." Murmurs rippled through the elders. "You can't rewrite the winds," one said. "I can't," the girl agreed. "But the winds can." She turned to Malachi. He took a step back. "No, don't look at me like that. You were chosen at the river," she said softly. "Not to carry me. To carry the missing." He stared at her, heart pounding. "I'm no chief, no bloodline. I'm not even native." "But you're not blind," said Ashki. "And you didn't run." The elders looked to each other. Then to Malachi. He shook his head slowly. "I'm just a man who pulled a girl from a river." "And the river," said the girl, "knows what it gives." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then the Apache elder stepped forward, drew a small blade, and cut a thin line across his palm. He held it out. Malachi hesitated, then matched the gesture. Their blood mixed in the dust, and the wind stirred, only once. But all heard it. Dust settled like snowfall around the circle. No one moved. Not the soldiers, not the warriors, not even the wind itself. The girl stood between the broken ashes of Morgan and the bloodline Malachi had unknowingly stepped into. Her expression was unreadable, older now somehow, as if every secret the earth had whispered to her had left something behind. Malachi wiped the blood from his palm, feeling the sting deep in his veins. It wasn't just a cut, it was a door. "You sure about this?" he asked quietly, voice rough with doubt. The Apache elder nodded. "You are not of our people, but you have stood where none of us dared. That is enough." The tall spoke next. "The fifth wind never had a face, only fire, but now it has voice." The Cheyenne elder stepped forward and offered Malachi a cloth bundle. Inside lay a simple token, a carved wooden medallion marked with the ancient sigil of the four directions. But a fifth mark, newly carved, had been added at the center. Not north, not south, not east or west. The center. Balance. "You will not lead us," the cedar elder said. "But you will remind us why we stand together." Ashki smirked. "They just gave you a holy job, rancher. You ready for that?" "No," Malachi replied, "but I reckon I'll ride it out." The girl stepped beside him. She looked different now, not in body, but in weight, like someone who had carried a burden and finally set it down. "They'll come again," she said. "Not Morgan. Others. Always others." "I know. But next time, they won't find us scattered." Malachi turned toward the soldiers. Shaw stood in the distance, still stunned, his men unsure whether to retreat or kneel. "You going to report this?" Malachi asked him. Shaw shook his head. "They wouldn't believe me. Hell, I barely do." "Then believe this," Malachi said. "The frontier isn't what it was." Shaw looked at the girl, at the circle of warriors, and nodded slowly. Maybe it never was. That night, fires were lit. Not for war, but for story. Elders spoke. Children listened. Songs once forbidden found voice again, and Malachi Kane sat among them, no longer an outsider, but not yet at peace. The girl sat quietly at his side, staring into the flame. "It's still out there," she said. "What is?" "The darkness that taught him to burn." He looked toward the horizon and saw no stars. 2 nights passed. The camp remained quiet, though no one truly slept. Fires burned lower. The drums fell silent. The 4 tribes lingered, hesitant to part, knowing something sacred had shifted, and something dangerous still lingered. Malachi felt it like a splinter beneath his skin. Not fear, not doubt, something else. Like unfinished breath. The girl hadn't spoken since that night. She stayed close, but her eyes drifted far, always to the east, where the wind carried a faint scent of charcoal and sage. Ashki approached just before dawn. "I scouted the old mining roads," she said. "Tracks. Deep ones. Not hooves. Wheels. Something heavy." Malachi frowned. "Wagons?" "No. Something iron. Army, perhaps. Or worse." He stood, muscles aching, mind sharp. "What did you see?" "Nothing I could name. But the earth didn't want it. The land recoiled. That's enough for me." They walked together through the perimeter. The soldiers had pulled back toward Fort Delaney, leaving behind only a single flag tied to a tree branch, white cloth with an iron star. Shaw's message: truce, but not trust. At the edge of camp, the girl stood on a bluff, watching the horizon. "Malachi," she said without turning. He joined her. "What do you see?" She raised her hand, fingers tracing the air like a map only she could read. "There's something waking. Bigger than Morgan. Older. It moved when I touched the fire." "You mean the light?" She shook her head. "No. The other fire. The one beneath." He looked at her carefully. "You mean you didn't bury it? You just stirred it." "I tried," she said. "But the ash tongue weren't the source. Just the echo." Ashki stepped forward, jaw tight. "Then we're not done." "No," the girl replied. "We're at the middle." From behind them, a rider galloped in from the west, dust trail behind him like smoke. Cheyenne scout. He rode hard, slid to a stop, breath ragged. "Outpost burned," he said. "No survivors, symbols painted in ash." He tossed a cloth to Malachi. Scorched and blood-stained, it bore a symbol neither tribal nor army. But Malachi recognized it, the mark from Morgan's pouch. Only now it had changed, split down the center, and in its place, 2 eyes drawn in soot. Watching. The girl clenched her fists. "The fire's learning," she whispered. And in the distance, a single wolf howled. then another, and another. The howl rippled across the canyon like a thread being pulled too tight. Then came the second, closer, lower. By the third, every fire in the camp snapped and hissed, as if the flames themselves flinched. Horses stamped the dirt. Warriors stood, eyes lifted, weapons touched. But the girl did not move. She stared at the cloth in Malachi's hand, the twin eyes drawn in soot, and whispered words he didn't understand. "Say that again," Malachi said. She turned to him slowly. "It means the watcher beneath. That symbol wasn't made by hands." Ashki unslung her bow. "Then who?" The girl's voice was hollow. "Something that slept too long, and now smells its chance." The scout who had brought the message pointed west. The ground trembled near the outpost. It wasn't horses. It was below. The elders were summoned again. They came grim, silent, robes trailing ash. "What's coming isn't Morgan," said the cedar woman, "and not the fifth wind. This is older, something the fifth may have once tried to lock away." Malachi stared at the horizon. "And when she struck Morgan down, she broke the lock." The Apache nodded. "He was the key, burned and branded. That's why the fire answered him." Ashki looked to the girl. "Can you stop it?" She shook her head. "No, not alone." The wind rose again, sharper now. Dry, bitter. The girl touched Malachi's arm. "We have to ride into the hollow, where the tribes once buried their dead and their sins. Before it rises above." "The deep hollow?" the Cheyenne elder whispered. "No one returns from there. That's why we go," she said. "Before it comes to us." Malachi tightened his saddle strap. "Then we ride at first light." Ashki nodded. "I'll take 6 with us." "No more. Quiet is our best hope." The elders exchanged glances, then bowed. The girl stepped into the firelight, her face aglow with embers. She looked older, heavier, and yet more certain. "This was never about the winds," she said. "It was about what hides between them." And far off, beneath the earth, something ancient stirred. It had waited. Now it listened. Now it remembered.